Meeting to order. It's 7 o'clock. I'm Mike Flynn, your chair, filling in for Mark Clark, who's online tonight. So let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was going to take the liberty to call on Kay. I think we have a new employee that you would like to introduce.
Yes,
Hi,
you
Jordan.
know me, I'm Kay Qualley, the Planning and Environmental Services Director. This is Olivia Strinsky, our new planner. And she's joined Eric's team as part of our planning and zoning staff. So she's brand new, like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, well,
So we're fortunate to have her on the staff. So I wanted everyone to welcome her as we have. So welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you. You all received the minutes of March 17th. If there's no changes or additions or corrections, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as stated.
Accept.
Harley makes the motion. Is there a second? Louis Ryman makes a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. All in favor. Our first petition is docket PC 04-21-2201, and it's to consider a petition of Scott and Lisa Fritz in regards to following a conditional use interim use permit request. That is to allow the placement of a dwelling in a new parcel to be located within the Agricultural Resource Conservation District on less than 40 acres. Proposal is 2.5, and it's in pursuit of chapter 5.5.4.2 and 10.4.6, 36 of the Winona County zoning ordinance. And then if Eric, if you could outline this petition for us. Thank you.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me online and as well as in here? Okay. Guess I'll start with the PowerPoint, and with these three petitions tonight, I guess please bear with me. I've tried to do a visual video walkthrough tour of each one. A couple of them are about 5 minutes long, so I just wanted to warn everybody. I think it warranted a walkthrough tour of the properties because of the dynamics that's involved. The first one is petitioner. The property owner is Laverne Fritz, and the petitioners are son Scott and daughter-in-law Lisa. This is in regards to allow a new building site in the Ag District on less than 40 acres. In this case, it would be 2.5 acres. I just want to keep your key that it may vary. It may range from 2.5 plus. It may end up being as much as 5 or 6 acres, depending on the configuration, should they receive approval for this. This is located in section 10 of Rolling Stone Township. And it's pursuant to 5.542 and 10.4636 of the zoning ordinance, in which a conditional use permit process or public review is necessary to allow the building site. Next slide. I can show what you see in the bottom right-hand corner is County Highway 23. And that would be going north. That's the road between Stockton and Minnesota City. And at this point, we're coming up to the Gunderson addition, which is actually now part of the city of Goodview. You can see Rolling Stone Township surrounds the area. And this farm is served by a private road that comes off of 23. There is a bridge that crosses Garvin Brook at that location. And you see kind of in the center, the existing Fritz farmstead. They wish to create a parcel kind of on a pasture area that's outlined in the red. Next slide. This is a LiDAR or elevation contour, and it sits on kind of a top of a knoll. It's kind of an irregular pasture looking area. And as we get into some of the pictures and some of the exhibits, they'll show kind of the nature of it. But it sits on some of the higher terrain on the point as you come up to the property, and the driveway is actually down below this point. But the brown lines and the yellow lines are showing 2-foot change in elevations with the proximate site. Next slide. Couple of photos as you come up the driveway. The first one on the left, you can see that the home site would sit on top of that point up in that area. Next slide. This is beyond view on top of that. The first one is looking kind of to the, I believe the northwest, and then a quite a little bit shift looking to the west in the picture on the right. Currently in pasture. According to the statements, it's never been cultivated or row cropped. Next slide. This would be approximately from where the building site would be, looking back at the feedlot and the barn that Laverne still maintains. Next slide. This is a view looking back to the east. That's the driveway. You can see the bridge, County Road 23 in the far distance, and actually the part of Gunderson Addition. That would be actually City of Goodview. Okay, we got a quick video. And there is a set of railroad tracks. It is a private drive. It is a private crossing, so it's an uncontrolled access. And this would be the view looking to the east. Now I'm panning. Should point out that the applicants were originally looking to build closer to the stream in that area, but due to floodplain issues, that was held off. To further this request, that would be potentially definitely removed out of the floodplain. Kind of looking at the point of the farmstead. There is, even that is pasture, there was some prime soils involved with this location, but there's also a lot of non-prime, so the configuration would be figured to take advantage of that. Also, it should be noted that the prime soils criteria, that this would be within 300 feet of the feedlot and other building, so the prime soils would not apply in this request. Again, looking at fairly levels off in this location. This is viewed to the west. I think that's probably pretty good. I think for the video, we can close that out. Thank you.
Sorry, Mark. I'm a little carried away there.
Okay. We did receive a Rolling Stone Township acknowledgement form. They did meet on April 11th, and they indicated support for the request. I believe also in the packet, we did receive an email from written comments from a neighbor indicating they encouraged the Planning Commission to support the request as well. Next slide. Planning Commission consider all the materials and all the testimony and everything in the packet tonight. The staff report and analysis has been such that we've indicated support in granting the conditional use permit. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval, staff has recommended 6 conditions for your consideration in regards to this. And with that, is there any questions that I can answer? If not, I believe the applicants are here, so I can turn it over. And if there's any questions that come up, I could field them at that time too. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Would the petitioners like to come up and speak on behalf of your petition?
Good evening. I'm Scott Fritz, my wife Lisa. My dad Laverne is also here with us tonight. Eric did a really great job of summing that all up for us. So I wanted to be here in case you guys had any questions, but in a nutshell, we've lived there since '74. It's my goal to be able to build there so that we can keep the farm in the family. I have a few siblings and then we have 3 children. And we'd like to see the farm continue to be a farm. And we don't want to see it turned into a subdivision or sold off or parceled off. So it's our goal to get there and then in time be able to obtain the whole farm. So in a nutshell, that's it, I think.
Any questions from the?
How many acres are on the whole?
It's 181.
And you guys run that or?
Yeah, between the 2 of us, we farm it. We're down to about 15 head of cattle, and then obviously they all have their calves. So we carry anywhere between 25 and 35 at any given time. The summer it may get up to 40, but then we sell the calves off. We don't keep too many of them, just a few. But that's it. And we board a couple of horses for somebody. We have 1 horse of our own.
Glad to see the small farms are still.
Yeah, you know, and it's, we don't use chemicals on the farm. We've been very environmentally friendly over the years. We've done our best to clean things up. We've brought in so many red boxes over the decades to get junk metal out. We've cleaned up after people from, previous generations before us. The flood of, was it 08, 07? Revealed a real big mess in a couple of our lower fields from when the railroad company used to dump cars in there as fill around all their bridges and stuff, and it revealed that, and we hauled that kind of stuff out. So yeah, we're a small family farm and we'd like to see it keep going that way.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you. If we have some later, we'll
Okay,
check back with you.
thanks.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Yes.
Arlie, in a second. All in favor of opening public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. So our public hearing is now open. And is there anyone who wishes to speak for or against this petition? The mic is yours. And is there anybody online? If you could watch that for me, it's going to be easier for you to see. Again, is there anybody wishing to speak for or against this petition? The mic is yours. Okay, for the 3rd time, I'll say, is there anybody wishing to speak for or against this petition? Please speak now.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second to close the hearing? Louis, all in favor, say aye to close the public hearing. Aye. Nay against that, and all in favor. Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll
Kelly.
just make a motion if
Yes.
I could.
You
I'd like to
absolutely can.
move that we we accept the findings, adopt the findings and conditions of staff and recommend that the board approve this petition.
Do I have a second to Kelly's? Arlie seconds that. As before we vote on it, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, say aye. 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 Okay, thank you, Mark. I don't think Patrick's there. Anybody opposed? Yeah, now I know where he is. I can see him in the corner of my eye here. No one voiced any opposition, so therefore the motion carries. And that will bring us to the next petition. It's docket 042122-02. This is to consider a petition from James and Deborah Rimlinger with representation from Midwest Industrial Fuels doing business as Consolidated Energy Company in regards to the following request. They're seeking to amend the Winona County zoning district map by rezoning 5.56 acre parcel that is currently zoned as Business and Recreational District B to Community Development 2, CD2 zoning district, and pursuant to the Chapter 5.4 and Chapter 10 of the Winona County zoning ordinance. And Eric, I think you have this one too, right?
And I guess one additional comment, especially for the petitioners that just heard, that will go in front of the county
Oh,
board.
sorry, yeah.
I just wanted
May
to-
10th, 9 o'clock.
It'll be placed as consent business, but it'll go in front of the county board the morning of May 10th.
Thanks,
At 9
Eric.
o'clock, and it's under consent. They may not pull it, but if there is questions, they could pull it for discussion. So we just want to let you
Right.
aware, of the.
Kay reminded me of that. Now, this is the second, so the third time I'll get it right.
Okay.
May 10th, 9 o'clock.
Okay, agenda item 42122, number 2. This is a rezoning request. Not a conditional use permit as we typically do, so it's slightly different as far as the findings and what has been put forth to the planning commission. In this case, the property owners are James and Deborah Remlinger, and they also have representation from a couple of parties tonight, which you might hear. They are looking to rezone a 5.56 acre parcel that is currently zoned business and recreational. It's a B zoning district, and they wish to rezone it to a community development 2 or CD2 of the zoning ordinance. In the staff report, I've kind of distinguished what the difference is between the two districts, and mainly community development 2, which is a variation of the CD in order to have more or less options as far as light industrial, mainly transportation and freight terminals is the only option under CD2. It was a kind of a district that had been born out of the Homer area, and then now it's been utilized in a couple places in the county because it seemed to be more palatable or compatible with the township desires and some of the neighborhoods in some of the various other uses that we get other than agricultural. Next slide. Well, we can follow along if you folks have your books or if you have your laptops with the packet. I'll just follow along, with the site plan. If we go to page 4 of the staff report, number 60 of the page, I think is a good illustration that shows the existing zoning districts. This is the applicant. This is the Peterbilt property that is currently for sale. It's been for sale for a few years. The applicants have submitted the comments on what their projected use or future use of this, and that it would be for fuel storage and a distribution site with office space and storage areas for their trucks. That would be part of the fleet, as well as fuel products that would be for delivery to customers. There'd be no public retail fueling. And I don't want to get too much in the proposed use because I want to point out probably very early in this discussion that this is a rezoning request. If it is approved, it's most likely you will see a conditional use permit in the very near future to actually look at the specific use and to look at that as a conditional use, slightly different process than what we're asked to look at tonight. Um, And I guess looking in the packet, if I could refer to number 6 in the staff report, page 62, it's a concept plan. It's showing where the proposed bulk liquid fuel tanks would be, transfer area, and it's got the shed and office shop. And it has the notes on how the proposed use would be. I guess going ahead now, I'm looking at pages 7, 8, and 9 in the staff report, mainly on page 9. You'll see a 2014 comprehensive land use map. That's a county-wide map, the first one on top. But if you were to follow I-90 and you look at that exit where 43 goes south towards Rushford and it intersects County Road 12, you'll see that that is a blue block. The small insert clip right below that, the land use classification, that is showing that it's currently classified in the land use map as rural residential service. So it's been carrying something other than ag all along. So it's not like we're making any decisions or contemplating any changes of taking agricultural land out. This classification goes all the way back to the 90s. It's a key area because it's an interchange along I-90. If we could see maybe all right, you can't select it. Okay. Okay.
She's gonna check.
Okay.
We did have things after we got it fixed.
Okay.
It's a really simple problem. Apologies.
Okay. On page 10 of your staff report of this one, page 66, the fine print, that's a GIS map that has the shaded colors. And you'll see I have a red X on the Peterbilt property showing the zoning designation. The surrounding property kind of to the east and to the north is also carrying business recreational. But if you look straightly across to the north, kind of the more of the yellowish, that is the FedEx property. That is currently zone CD2. And then the one right to the left was formerly the Severson, and that is zone CD2. Now the Severson, it's staff's understanding that has been purchased by Midwest Fuels, and that is the proposed purchaser of this Peterbilt property to add to their operation. So they would hypothetically own the Peterbilt property as well as where that large tank, and I believe they have authority to put another large tank on that site that borders Gopher Road in that area. Staff did receive a township acknowledgement form from Warren Township, and they indicated support during the township meeting. Wanted to also note that we sent out about a quarter mile, 18 notices of the property owner, as well as we sent notices to Wilson, Hart, and Wiskoy Township, since they were located within 2 miles of that area with this rezoning request. We've included the township profile and the roadways. If we have the rezoning, you can see there's it's an interchange. It's the westbound ramp lane that it borders, and it comes on to State Highway 43, in which people can go south towards Rushford, or if you take a right, there's a township road that goes to the north, or if you take a right, it's County Road 12 that intersects it east and west from that point. Okay, let me see if the video plays, because I don't, let's see if we have, okay,
It may or may not, given the Wi-Fi connection.
okay. Okay, and this is starting out on that off ramp as you're traveling I-90 on the westbound lane. Wanted to kind of show the perspective looking south. It's got good visual access from I-90. That's the adjacent neighboring property that's also zoned B. You can see the interchange pass, that's Highway 43. And I wanted to show that it does have a pedestal for an advertising device. How that may weigh into something in the future, that could be a question you might have for the petitioner, whether they would like to rehab that feature or not. It's currently has a fenced perimeter around the property. It has 5 bays. Did review the property file. We did have some septic information. I believe they did put in some holding tanks for a wash bay. I believe you'll see those as I kind of circle around the set of buildings. It has considerable parking lot. I believe some gravel and some in bituminous at the current moment. And this would be, again, the off ramp where there is a stop sign. That would be the 43 state highway that goes back over I-90 and go towards Rushford. And even though this fenced enclosure, that's not representing the property line. I believe, you'll see as I go around the parking entrance that you'll see where the septic tanks for holding tanks are located. This is the west side of the building. And as we're kind of walking to the north, you can see that there is a township road that continues on to the north, just off to the left. As I circle around to the north side of the property, I'm now looking at the FedEx facility that's located immediately to the north, as well as the Midwest Fuels parcel that's located there. And that would be one of the closer residences to the west. Be County Road 12. And loading docks again on the north side of the building, as well as an accessory structure that's located to the east of the building that's used for storage. I believe they have 2 vehicle access driveways on the north side. You can see the one in the distance. And the one more towards the west as I pan around and show one of the primary accesses here. That's okay. That's probably enough. Okay. That's okay. We'll continue on. And I think I touched on the township acknowledgement form that we did receive support from Warren Township on that. And with a conclusion, should the rezoning be successful, again, a conditional use permit request would be submitted. Staff has included recommended findings of fact and consideration of the requested rezoning of this parcel. And we've suggested the findings that would indicate support for this. And with that, I believe the applicant's representative is here, so I guess I'd turn it over to them unless you have some questions for me at this point.
But just a confirmation, across the road, Midwest Fuels owns those storage tanks, right?
Mhm.
And they're already CD2 district, right?
Correct.
And what you're trying to do, if I hear everybody right, is make this parcel the same district as where their storage tanks already are.
Correct.
So
Because there is difficulty with what the applicants hypothetically would like to do with the B commercial recreational district. It's not spelled out clearly, and you could make an argument it may not be a permitted activity in the commercial recreational district.
okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to make clear. Any other questions from anybody for Eric? Petitioners, anybody, the owners, Midwest, anybody, come on up and give us the pros on your request to change the zoning.
My name is Andrew Peters. I'm with Consolidated Energy Company at 920 10th Avenue North in Onalaska, Wisconsin. I'm here with Joel Reinhardt is also online there. We agree completely with Eric's staff report. It's accurate. We just want to get it into that CD2 zoning district, like the neighboring parcels. We think we have a really good use of this property that's kind of sat there for a while, and it's kind of a unique piece of ground. And we think that putting some tanks out here and having it right on the interstate and near these similar uses is something that we can, Warren Township was in favor of it, to have propane access that close and some other fuels. And we're excited to get that building kind of rehabbed and get the site rolling. So if you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, yeah, agree with Eric, and we hope to move forward. So I got any?
Is your intentions to deliver bulk fuel out of there?
Yeah, yep. We're gonna store.
I'm not sure if everybody, are you guys able to hear me? This is Joel from Consolidated.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Go ahead,
Great.
Joel.
Yeah. First of all, thanks everybody for your time. Yeah, to answer your question, our intention is to have bulk fuel and propane distribution out of that site. To provide a little bit of background, back in December, we had acquired Severson Oil out of Winona. And as part of that deal, we did not acquire their property down on Louisa Street. And so our intention would be to essentially relocate our office and operations out of that facility up the hill to the Peterbilt site. And so we would base our trucks out of there, have our office staff on site, and then obviously utilize the truck shop and the rest of that property for operations.
Any other questions? Anyone else representing the petition have any input? Not? Okay, thank you.
Right, thanks.
With nobody else, I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye to open
Aye.
public hearing.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. So all in favor, and Mark thumbs up, and Patrick's up there somewhere. I see Patrick's online. So I'll open the microphone up to anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request. Please speak up or come to the podium, whether online or present. Well, again, anybody wishing to speak for or against this rezoning petition request? Come forward, speak.
My name is Lila Solway and I live kitty corner from it. And I'm not opposed to the rezoning. I'm just wondering what happens with the water and the sewer and well, I mean, there's not very much property there to dispose of water from the truck washings and stuff.
Well, I can't answer that, but I'll let other people do that. The
Like I
petition,
said, I think it's a great idea.
the
but-
petition right now is for the rezoning.
Oh,
And
okay,
those
sorry.
issues will come up as they try to develop it. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against this petition? And I'll repeat twice. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against the rezoning petition? And then for the third and final time, is there anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning petition? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. And I have a second from Kelly. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. I think our people online, we're all thumbs up on that, right, Mark, Patrick? Just for the record. Patrick's got his hand up, so we got that concluded. Now, commission. Do you want to recommend this? If so, I would entertain a motion. Well, somebody give me a motion. I didn't make the motion. I'm looking for you
I would
guys
make
to
a
do that.
motion to, we directly would approve this rezoning correctly. Is that correct?
No, it
We
would go,
recommend
it would go to
be-
the county,
Okay,
county board.
so I would make a motion to accept the findings of fact as written and recommend it for approval.
And we have a second now. Eric, any input that you're looking for?
Hold up. No, wait.
Okay. Any just, yeah, go ahead,
Did
Kelly.
that include the conditions?
Yes, with the
Yes.
conditions, sorry.
There's no
Okay,
conditions.
that's,
Recommendations.
all right.
The business isn't gonna be much different than it was before.
This is just so they can move to the next phase. And this would go before the county board on May 10th. It's 9 a.m.
And the one difference with this is that since it's an amendment, we will have another public hearing that the county board has to
Has to do for
conduct. Yeah,
formality.
That's the difference with this type of request.
Because this is a zoning request, a little bit different than our conditional uses. And,
I still second it.
all right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. And I got Mark's thumb up. Patrick. Maybe he'll get his hand up. I don't know. Yes. Okay. So I can finalize that as all in favor. So that will again go before the county board for public hearing, if I hear Eric right, on May 10th, 9 o'clock in the morning. Thank you. And our third item tonight is docket PC 04-21-2203. And this is a petition of Doug Santon in regards to a following conditional use or interim use permit request, allowing the placement of a dwelling on a new parcel to be located within an ag resource conservation district of less than 40 acres, proposed 22 acres pursuant of chapter 5.5.4.2 and 10.4.636 of the Winona County Ordinance. And it allows for the placement of a dwelling to be located within a shoreland natural feature overlay district and the floodplain overlay district pursuant of the chapter 5.5.4.4 and chapters 5.5.4.5 and chapter 11.3.53 and chapter 11.4 of the Winona County Ordinance. And Eric, you have this one too, I believe?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Chair Flynn. Thanks for reading those sections because this is multifaceted request because it is currently zoned agricultural and it's also shoreland and it's also floodplain. And I think probably the most pressing issue is the floodplain component. And I believe in your possession is a packet, a letter that we received from the Minnesota DNR this evening on what they have found in their research as far as their files and talking with the various state floodplain manager people. This is in Richmond Township and section 16. It's along a private lane, Fish Pond Lane. You can see that the acreage is in that green polygon and it is bordered by a channel of the Mississippi. I guess I'll move on to the next series of pictures and slides. The applicants wish to put a 40 by 65 seasonable dwelling, and this request was processed with the concept that it would need to meet or exceed state and local floodplain standards. We've indicated a definition of a seasonal dwelling as a freestanding residence designed for one or occupied by one family only and used for recreational enjoyment on a temporary basis. Next slide. The applicant has had some assistance with Brad from G Cubed, who's also here tonight. You'll see the concept proposal. What is unique about this property is pointed out in the staff report. Its name, the Hot Fish Shop Ponds, was historically used by a restaurant owner in the East End, the famous Hot Fish Shop. And I believe they used to use these ponds that were created for raising fish with their restaurant. I believe it also did have a seasonable or a mobile home on the property going back considerably. In the staff report, we've identified kind of the timeline and some of the events. Throughout the last 45 years, it's also been used as a sand stockpile for beneficial use, I believe in conjunction with U.S. Corps of Engineers dredging operations. You'll see some of the pictures and some of the video of what the current status is. And also looking at the DNR letter, they have made comments and they have their report as it relates to the dredged material placement site, the amounts, the time frame, and the duration with that. The G Cube, that's good, I guess. No, that's fine. This is a, for floodplain management, this is a simple diagram to show that within the floodplain, you have different segments. You would call the general area the flood hazard area, where you have the stream channel and where it's subject to frequent flooding is considered the floodway. The areas that are outside of that are considered flood fringe. And you're going to see some mapping exhibits that puts this controversy more in perspective. We're looking at a site that is technically considered floodway, even though it has considerable elevation with it. So I think we also have online the DNR local hydrologist, Lucas Youngsma, who will probably add to his letter and comment and save any questions for the floodplain managers too. They'll be able to add to whatever comments that I have. Next slide. The site, again, I'm going to point out on this. What they were looking to put was right in this area. Walk over here. Well, in that area. And this is the proposed new floodplain profile in which maps have been prepared for the county. And what you see in the reddish color is what's considered the floodway. So that's the controversy that we're looking at tonight with the new information and the determination. The red line, you see it's labeled 650-61. That is what's the calculated base flood elevation for this site. It does not, you'll look at the applicant's contour map, you're going to see that there's elevations that are considerably higher than this base flood elevation. But the interpretation of this letter is that the sand, the existing grade, the existing topography is such that it's supposed to be temporary in nature and at some point removed. So even though it may exceed, the height, it's still considered floodway by this determination from Minnesota DNR. With that map in the blue, I believe that would be the flood fringe, AE. So hypothetically, it would be possible that if they have an alternative site, they could bring something else back that would remove the floodway designation and make something acceptable as far as permitting through flood fringe. I guess we'll hear from all the parties on the practicality or the potential of that.
So I'm seeing kind of a pinkish part, and
Yes.
then kind of a greenish part, and then a blue part.
Don't mind that you see that line that's supposed to be pink.
That's all
Yeah,
supposed to be
yeah,
pink.
it's just showing different panel coverages and it's supposed to be blended in. It's just
That's
kind
all
of showing a
floodway
picture.
then.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
all floodway at that point. Let's move on to the next slide. This was a firm map that I made. This just shows the 1984 FEMA map, and it's more general in nature. And it just essentially shows the panel number and just essentially the floodplain map going back to 1984 with this site. Next slide. Pictures. The top two are essentially the riparian close, showing what the shore line looks like at that point. The bottom left-hand picture is coming off of Highway 61, showing that it is a gated private access. It's gated and locked. And as you cross the double set of railroad tracks, or I guess maybe one set of tracks there, the Canadian Pacific, you would take an immediate left, and then there's another set of locked gates to access the property. Again, the lower right is showing the shoreline. Showing a couple pictures on the top are showing what the proposed site was selected for a potential seasonable cabin. The picture on the bottom left is showing the second gated entrance. If you can look at the bottom right, you can see actually a pink stake. That corresponds with the consultant's proposed elevation site that they had set as a benchmark. And it corresponds with their plan that they have in your packet. Next slide. This was obtained from the Winona County Assessor's records. It shows the mobile home that previously existed on the property.
Well, Eric, was that in the same area that they're thinking of building?
I can't tell, other than the video, you'll see where there is electrical service and there's overhead wires and it served that mobile home. That would probably be a pretty good indicator of where that mobile home was. So I guess pay attention for that as I got a guided walking tour as I walk in and out of the property, and they could almost, they can maybe elaborate to where that was too, more specifically.
When that area flooded last?
Yeah, the Mississippi River has real good records as far as when it reached flood stage. And, we had some high events, going back 10 years, and then we had some significant ones in the 2000s, and then in the late 90s, we've had, what had come close to flood stage in the Mississippi, and actually some that have exceeded flood stage. 2001, I think, was probably the last major flooding event. Yep, and bear with me, this is two segments. This is kind of showing now, I'm walking down the existing drive that serves the property, and I'm kind of showing where that red stake was. There is the bank of sand, and I'm panning to the north. I'm walking along the crest of the existing sand pile, kind of zooming in on where that pink stake had been set as a benchmark.
I don't quite understand what the pink stake is indicating.
That's where they took some measurements. They actually shot it with a transit in the laser, and they actually have an elevation set that corresponds with the plans that they'd like to do on the site. Then they would, if they were approved, they'd do grading associated with that. They would try to make sure that the lowest floor elevation of any structure is set at a certain elevation, and that they could follow through with it.
That just indicates a certain height?
Yeah. Yep. This is now panning back essentially downriver and looking at some of the pond areas that they have. I'm kind of showing Highway 61 in the distance along the bluff. Again, that
Plans on filling them ponds?
not that I'm aware of, no. Okay, and then there's a second part. Again, this is, I think, looking at the desired location. The river is on the back side of that. Now I just wanted to show the old growth trees, and now this is the existing field road to the property. And I'm just essentially walking my way back out to where the gated accesses are right below Highway 61 to show you the kind of the terrain and the nature of this parcel in general.
When they were looking to build is right where the stockpile was.
Yes,
That's probably the highest point of that area.
yes, yes.
So then does the road that would access the actual dwelling site, that drops back down again? And would, if there was a flood, the road would be flooded?
Yes, yes, I believe it would be.
Emergency vehicles would struggle to get in and out in the entrance.
Yes, there could be concerns.
Has water been on that site or flooded at that high point?
I don't believe so. Where we were looking at back, no. I mean, it has probably swelled in these low-lying pond areas, in the low-lying wetland areas that you see in that area.
In a flood, that would probably backfill.
Yes. But you can see there's 40 feet, 30 to 40 feet elevation of the ground, that's considerably, much higher. No, that has not flooded in the last flooding events.
You don't plan on doing anything with the road?
I don't believe so at this point. And so come up and kind of hang a right up here at this, you'll see kind of where there was historical electrical service, and there is overhead. There's a pole. And my estimation is that the mobile home was probably somewhere in this area.
Was the mobile home permitted?
It was back in the, I believe, late 70s.
Bonds, if I remember right.
Yes. It serves kind of caretaker of the property and probably like an office area when they were working there. So I don't know if it was occupied as a dwelling per se, but more of a office cabin.
But it was more than just what's the 400 square feet is the minimum square footage or the maximum square footage for a travel trailer. It exceeded that. It was a dwelling.
No, it's just a mobile home. It wasn't a travel trailer. It was a mobile home, a single wide.
It was operational for the fish ponds.
Yeah, but if they're under 400 square feet, they fall under the need for a permit.
I'm not following you.
A camper, so to speak.
Yeah.
If it's less than 400 square feet, it doesn't require permitting. If it exceeds 400 square feet, it requires permitting. And so I was trying to figure, that looks like that would be around that size, which would give it some weight as having been an established one.
Okay. I believe we have 150 foot square feet is our threshold for, and then distinguishing between value, whether it's over $2,000 or over 150 square feet. We still go through permitting with structures.
They probably didn't have anything like that in the 70s and 80s, so,
Probably not. And this is the last.
Land they put a building.
This is the last approach. This is the second gate. And then as you round this corner, you'll see the tracks. And then there's a gate on the other side of the tracks, entrance on that. Should be noted that there is a field road that goes off on the other side, down river too. And I believe it serves some seasonal dwellings too that are on the bank, inward bank of this. That shows the address and that point. Okay, yep. I think that's good for video. Thank you. Yeah,
I'm getting dizzy. No.
like the Blair Witch Project. Richmond Township did review this in March, and they just in hand wrote note that they indicated acceptance of the request. There wasn't really a formal, no comments or formal support. It just they acknowledged and accepted that they had been informed of the request. Next slide. Again, I guess the Planning Commission shall take all testimony and information in making the findings. The original staff report was in support of granting the CUP. That was prior to the letter of the DNR that we just received tonight. We had 16 conditions and we had considerable findings. In view of the DNR letter, we would have a problem the county approving this based on their position. We would most likely have to take the stance we could not issue a zoning permit for that based on the determination of the sand status and the floodway status. So I guess we'd like to hear information from both the DNR at this point, as well as the applicant, and continue through with this public hearing. That would be our recommendation at this point.
Any questions for Eric from the commission? Thank you. I'd like to hear, there's a lot of data here, and I assume there's a lot of conversation we can have on a little more background explaining this. So I'd like to open it up to the petitioners or consultants to try to give us an idea of your plan and how it would fit all the documentation that we got.
Thank you. My name is Doug Stanton. I am the owner of the property or newly acquired property. My address is 30323 Wildlife Haven Road, Winona, Minnesota.
Thank you.
Wiskoy Township. So I guess background is what you asked for and requested. I grew up by the Twin Bluffs I was born in 1961, so I drove by those ponds on a bus from day one, and always thought it was pretty cool little location for a outdoors person. At one point, there were actually 2 trailer homes down there. The overhead power is still in place. There are 3 functional wells on site to create aeration for those ponds. Back in the day, that's how what they did to establish those commercial ponds. So when I acquired the property, knowing the history of the number of buildings that have went up on the main channel and the ones adjacent to me on the main channel, hired G Cubed because I wanted to do it as professional as possible. The pink stake that Eric referred to earlier was a benchmark location of finished floor at 657. 652 is BFE, with a requirement of living elevation at 653 and a half. So we established it much greater than that, to ensure that we wouldn't have an issue. There are 400,000 cubic yards of sand. One thing that was said earlier is by a statement after a question was, is that the highest spot? That is not the highest spot. That sand pile is 66 feet high downstream of that and goes for another quarter mile. From my understanding, back in the day when they established this placement site with the Corps of Engineers, this was a permanent placement for this sand. So I guess I'm new to this, asking for conditional use but confused as to why this homestead at that elevation, with the elevation that was created by agencies, is not the same as homesteads only a half a mile up or a half a mile down from this location. I have yet, not saying it hasn't happened, but I'm 60 years old. Unless I drove by there one day and missed it, I have not seen those roads flood. So that elevation going in and out, I guess I've never seen that. So that's it in a nutshell, I guess. I appreciate your time.
Any questions?
I do have a question. When did you purchase the property?
About 5 months ago, I bought it from Matthew, Midwest Fuels. The original purchase, they purchased it back some time ago. And the removal of sand from that island, very, very reminiscent to Homer, is infeasible just due to the railways requirements for flagging. So their potential for profit with those requirements with the railroad, they just elected to sell the property.
And do you know if Matthew owned it in the early 1980s?
No, they did not. Hot Fish Shop Pond owner owned it.
Okay,
And I don't remember their names, but I think everybody,
Lambert.
some of us remember Hot Fish Shop Restaurant. So, yeah, that's what I know.
okay, thank you.
Just one quick question. I
Sure.
noticed in researching things, you were going to restore the culverts and the stop logs in the ponds. Are you planning on doing any commercial use of those ponds?
No, I think it would take, I haven't had the conversation with DNR and or Corps. I think back there was 3 culverts that fed in and out of those ponds to the main channel. I guess my desire or intent would not be to open that can of worms up, but there is 2 culverts that connect ponds. Is the intent to use the commercial ponds being there conveyed that way? Because my property taxes, I am zoned residential and commercial. And it's a hefty tune in taxes based upon that classification. So would I rule it out? I'm not going to say no, as long as there's established commercial ponds. But again, I think part of the big factor here is the placement of that sand. And I'm not trying to overstep my bounds here, but it sounds like we're saying that the sand or that particular portion of the island is in the floodway, which there's a lot of places in the floodway. And if the sand was put there for permanent in the original placement of, I don't know how we can go backwards on that. But I may be mistaken.
Any other
I
questions?
do have one more question. Do you
Sure.
own any other property on the other side of the road?
No.
Okay. So just that one parcel that we've seen?
Yep.
Kind of, okay,
It's about 28 acres.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any representatives on behalf of the petitioner wishing to speak? If not, Motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Jordan seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Mark's got his thumb up. I don't know, Patrick's got his hand up, so we're all in favor. So now I'm going to open the public hearing for anyone wishing to speak for or against this petition. The mic is open. Is there anybody online, Kay, that I'm missing?
Our agency representative, Lucas is unmuted now, I think.
If Lucas is willing to speak, speak away. Are we having a hard time unmuting him? If it's a technical difficulty, I don't want to cut him short.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can.
All right. I was double muted, both my headset and the feature just had to be unmuted. So yes, Planning Commission members, staff, as well as petitioners, like to introduce myself. I'm Lucas Youngsma, DNR area hydrologist. I am out of the Lake City office, and I did supply a letter dated today, this afternoon, and I do apologize for the short turnaround time to get that before you. Did a fairly extensive review of this particular site and the history of the Corps of Engineers dredge placement and the approvals and review process. And in addition to what I'd communicated in the letter, I really feel like it's important to stress that the historic aspect here of the Corps of Engineers placing material within a floodplain, a general floodplain, which includes both the flood fringe and the floodway, is really based on the proposal that they had for it to be beneficially reused. And so, the review processes that happened at the state, federal, and local levels did not look at this necessarily in the light of the material being necessarily left there for future developmental purposes. The intentions that were conveyed were that this were to be available for that beneficial reuse, and that the calculations that the Corps of Engineers developed were that there would be roughly 400,000 cubic yards of material placed on this site, and the demand for that beneficially reusable material would also equal approximately 400,000 cubic yards. So I think that that's the, in addition to, the letter, I think that's the point that would really like to make is that, placement here was reviewed under that auspice as being available for beneficial reuse and being eventually removed, versus if fill material were to be brought into the floodplain for eventually building a residential structure on top, that would be handled in a different fashion.
Hearing no other comments. Is there anybody else wishing to speak for or against this petition, online or here. Again, anyone else wishing to speak for or against this petition, please come forward and speak.
Hi. My name is Kevin Gady. I live right across the road from where this is proposed, 24555 Highway 61. I've lived there 15 years, and I've seen that being built with sand and being taken out pretty much on a regular basis over the years. So that's just for your thought. But the green arrows or the green lines that are on the diagram to potentially replace the culverts, I guess I'm just concerned about that and hope that it's done correctly to keep the land the way it is. That's my only concerns. And then the other concerns are just not make it a rental property, that it would be just used by the family of Doug and his family. So those are my only concerns.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak for or against this petition? Please come forward. Again, anybody wishing to speak for or against this petition? Now's your time. Speak up. And for the third and final time, is there anyone else wishing to speak for or against this petition? Hearing none, do I have a motion to close the public hearing? Arlie makes the motion. Do I have a second? Thanks, Kelly. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yep. So we got Patrick. So all in favor. Commission? Discussion.
Well, I guess, we got some late breaking news regarding the stand for beneficial use. And I guess it's not really our role as a planning commission to work through these issues between the DNR and Army Corps of Engineers, et cetera. So my recommendation would be to table this, to allow some time for the petitioner to work with whoever they need to work with, to see if they can just, find a solution to this. So that would be my motion, to table this.
Is there a second to that motion of tabling?
And the reason I'm thinking that is, if the DNR, they wanted that land, why didn't they buy it? And I agree with Kelly that there's got to be a happy medium there somewhere that they can still use it, possibly with him, as well as store sand there. So I agree that we should table it and see if they could come up with some ideas to do that.
So you've seconded the motion. So now we'll have discussion.
Mr. Chair, just wanted to point out that there, Mr. Byron had raised his hand a minute ago prior to the second.
Okay, in fairness, though, I want to hear what Patrick has to say. Patrick, we haven't voted on it. We've got a motion in a second, and now we're in discussion.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I think the 2 points that Kelly and our chairman made are very appropriate, and I support that. I would think about further discussion on this until more definitive answers or information are presented.
Thank you, Patrick. Now we've got a motion in a second. Now's our time to discuss this, Steve.
Yeah, so I've got a list of questions.
That's all right.
So, who does the government still have some type of, the government, the DNR, are they asserting that they still have some power or control over this property? Does anyone have an answer to that? So I'm trying to figure out if the was this property once government owned? Was it created by the government through the dredging process? And if so, the government profited once from, first of all, using the property for storing sand, and then they must have sold it to the general public, profited again.
The gentleman from DNR has his hand raised.
And I want you to lay your questions out and then I will get to, yeah, okay.
And so anyhow, the government's profited multiple times on this property, the way I see it, and now they're still trying to control it while while the government is again taking taxes from the property owner, yet a third profit for the government. I need to know whether the government has any authority in this property. And if so, that seems like that would be a tremendous burden for the landowner to, not have, was there full disclosure that to the landowner when they purchase the property that the government still wants or asserts that they have the right to move sand in or out from this property? So if the DNR wants to speak to that, then
They should be paying taxes on it if they're doing that.
Okay, now I'll get to Lucas, but it's our discussion now, and later when we're done discussing it, Lucas, I'll get back to you. Any other discussions from the commission? Well, I'd like to contribute a little bit here. I'm kind of feeling like Commissioner Jacobs. This used to be a fish pond. It was or a retail thing. I remember it in its heyday. Back when Lambert, I think was his name, did that. And the original buildings, I think, were used to do the fish ponds. It's 28 acres. And they had a fish market, if you remember, retail fish market as well. Again, we're all saying who has right to what. And I'm not sure when it was public land, but we know that Hot Fish Shop owned it for a long time. And then the petitioner bought it from Matthew or Midwest Fields or whatever their identity was. In this situation, if it had been used for sand storage, not sure how that was done commercially. If it was just stored there, moved when they felt like it, or if it's permanent, there's a lot of questions about that. We heard earlier from the petitioner, it's zoned commercial and residential, if I heard him correctly. So getting back to what we know about the taxes, who has the right to it? I'm just throwing the question out.
I think, if I may.
Yes, you may, Kelly. This is our conversation, and we'll bring in the gentleman from the DNR
Yeah.
after we
I
have
mean,
questions.
those are all good questions. Normally, if you own a piece of land and someone else has a right to do something with it, it's like called an easement, right? So I think, and we don't have all that information. So I guess what I'd like to do is give the petitioner and maybe the engineering firm, if they're still involved, the opportunity to work with the relevant parties, be they the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources or the Army Corps of Engineers, to find out, what are the rights to this particular sand pile and what statute or what was recorded with the property that gives them those rights, and then how does the landowner utilize their property. But we can't do that here. So I guess that's why my motion was.
And
to
I
table it.
understand what you're saying, Kelly, and that supports your motion to table it, and that is our conversation.
Yeah.
That is what we're discussing now,
Yeah.
tabling, all right? Yes, Steve.
So your thoughts were my exact thoughts before you made the motion first, and that's what I was thinking too, is this probably needs to be tabled. But I still want to flesh out as many questions as we can, so we get those all while we're in discussion, get those all so that the petitioner and staff can figure the answers out.
And
DNR potentially.
And that's why I'm entertaining this conversation to flush out where we want to go with this tabling. So the people that are here, they put a lot of effort in it, there's a lot of research on it, and we have to be fair with this. And if we're confused, it might not get the right result for our petitioner, and that's not what we're here for. Everybody okay if I bring Lucas on? Are we ready? Lucas, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So a question was asked as to the relationship. Having spoken with the representative from the Army Corps of Engineers, Paul Mahayeski, the Corps of Engineers never owned this property. They always had an agreement over the roughly 40 years that this site was in operation. And that lease agreement had not been renewed in recent years. And my understanding from the Army Corps of Engineers is that the Corps placed the material and then it was up to the property owner on the beneficial reuse aspects and trucking that off. And if that was, done, for a profit or not, was not really a purview of the Corps of Engineers, or the state of Minnesota. So just wanted to provide my understanding in answer to that question.
So if I, go ahead.
Lucas, I guess the way you're saying is whoever owned that property had the right to sell that sand for a profit.
That is my understanding.
And if,
Go ahead.
so you said there was a lease for 40 years?
The verbal lease, wasn't it?
Lucas, you said there was a lease for 40 years?
There was a formal agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers and the property owners, as I
Okay.
understand it.
And then that agreement was not renewed?
That agreement has not been renewed over the last couple of years.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that the only sticking point here is a bunch of sand that needs to be moved?
So to reiterate, DNR's position is that the location of that sand was in the floodplain and in the floodway, and that material had been placed there over the course of time, built up, and that the approval process, the review processes that have been in place did not look at that as though it were permanent placement, but as though it was for beneficial reuse coming in and material going out.
Did the DNR disclose that to the, full disclosure to whoever would purchase the property?
DNR would not have a role in that type of a disclosure. We certainly would have, communicated that had we been contacted.
Well, that brings some clarity into some of the questions I had. Harley, either for Lucas or the commission, go ahead.
So Lucas, can the petitioner get a release of any kind stating that you guys have no interest in that?
I don't think, I feel like.
That has the interest in it, right?
Yes, the Corps.
But they don't own land.
I don't feel like in my view, the DNR is nothing more than a disgruntled
Taking it when you get it.
adjacent landowner,
I mean, I don't think he really needs anything.
he doesn't have authority. the only person here that I think has authority at this point is the person who purchased the property.
Yes.
And if there was any ties to control over the property, it should be laid out in the, somewhere in the deed.
DNR,
Yeah.
if they want to do it, I mean, that's something they need to work out with the landowner now. You know, but right now to what we're doing, I don't feel, like you said, Steve, I don't feel he needs to have anything either.
This petition is for the landowner, not, we drifted from the reason of the petition here a little bit. I'd like to give the landowner a chance to comment on what you've heard here over the last few minutes. You purchased it. Was anything on your deed? Did you have any insight on some of the knowledge that you just heard about?
Again, my name is Doug Stanton. I think where maybe some of the confusion is, so I can clarify, the DNR does not own the sand. The DNR is simply saying at one point, way back in time, they, in collaboration with the private landowner and the Corps of Engineers, allowed the placement of sand on the property. And they're in further discussions and review and investigation. Particular documents will show that the placement of the sand was designated permanent. It also states that it is for reuse, but it is reuse has to be granted by the landowner. Hence the reason not every Tom, Dick, and Harry can go in, out, in, out, in, out from a liability and trespassing scenario. So when it became non-profitable for larger entities to remove the sand and acquire income from there, then the sand just sits there. And I think Lucas's stance is that this is not a permanent sand. You're bringing fill in to create an elevation. But if there's documentation that shows that the sand was dedicated to be permanent on site with the potential for reuse. Now, nobody can predict that. In his conversation, I happen to own another property in Kellogg, Minnesota, that the Corps of Engineers were trying to buy both of these in negotiations prior to me purchasing them. So I've had lengthy discussions with Paul from the Corps. In fact, he called me wanting to talk about the Kellogg site. I asked him, is there any desire to reutilize that island as a distribution site as we keep taking sand away from it? Because we can still take sand off of it. We're just using the lowest point of the big mountain of 400,000 cubic yards, establishing an elevation that is satisfactory with FEMA and BFEs to create a seasonal dwelling in lieu of the trailer house that once was there.
How long has that sand pile sat there for now?
Well, I graduated in '80, and that's about when they started.
I mean, when did they quit putting it in there?
That I'd be lying if I told you, but it's been quite some time.
Over 10 years?
I'd say, yeah. Well, no, I'll say as much as 20.
Okay.
Maybe more than that, because my kids I hate to say I'm getting old, but my kids are near 30.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Steve, but we're just kind of getting off
we're
the
getting
topic.
So
Kay, can I have you interject here? And Kay's been trying to get in there.
Mark Clark wanted to make a comment, and if he's able
Okay.
to unmute, otherwise I have his comment. these other ones.
I'd like Mark to do that, and then I'm going to go back to Steve. And can you stay there a little
Yeah,
bit?
because my question is for the petitioner.
Pointing on his microphone, I'm not sure if he's able to unmute, but it says, Mark Clark, if he bought the property with the stand, it should be his option to sell it or keep it.
Okay,
If I have the other messages. from-
just made a statement. I take that as a statement. Now, Steve, your question to Doug.
Along the lines of Mark's comment, the beneficial reuse of the sand. Do you control as the owner currently the beneficial reuse of the sand?
Yes.
So you could either sell the sand, or if you decide that a beneficial reuse to you is to build a dwelling on it, that's a beneficial reuse of the sand, in my view.
Okay, that's a statement.
Yeah, I don't see any difference between that and him hauling in fill to establish the elevation that's required anyway.
No, let's get back though to our motion and our second, which was to table this. We had a lot of discussion, but we need to get back to our motion. We're going to table it or not. If it passes or doesn't pass, then we'll go to the next level here. But let's get this one off the table. Are we ready to vote on the motion to table this?
But so before we vote on that, are we asking staff to do something? Because staff has changed their position from being supportive to being not supportive. And I don't really find that I'm getting anything from the DNR other than that they just don't want this to happen. I don't feel like they have power, control, or authority. And also, if it's the petitioner's dollars that are paying for this petition to be processed right now, does it matter to you if we table it, or are you wanting a vote on this up or down tonight?
Again, I've never been through one of these, and the answer to your specific question is I am confident that with tabling it and finding the proper information, it will benefit all. To
Thank
answer
you.
your question.
Because we have learned a lot here, I think, tonight. And if we get all the agencies together, because I can tell you put a lot of research in this already. You have a lot of documentation. And I want to give you a fair hearing. I want to give everybody a good opportunity. And I think your tabling this was concerned that all the variables wouldn't be presented here to give you a fair end result. And that's where we are. Can't promise up or down. But if we need more information, and the staff needs more information, if that was your question, from where they were, it'll give them time to answer some of this stuff as well. I think I learned a lot here about who owns this, where the sand was going, and things like that. So,
I guess, I'm sorry. I guess tabling it will get us to an answer. We don't have all the information we need, I don't think, quite yet. I don't think the petitioner has all the information he needs. And if we were to just, let's say we just approved it, it might cause the petitioner unanticipated problems. So I would like to give the opportunity to the petitioner to work with the various agencies to get the information necessary to proceed with his plans.
I agree with Kelly on that. I think if we spin it off to March or May 10th at 9:00, I'm not so sure it'll get the results one way or the other, because it sounds like we're lacking information. And there's been a lot of support for that. You've all contributed. So I'm going to go back to the petition or to the motion to table. And if we have enough information, I would recommend that we vote on tabling it. So all of those in favor of tabling it, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those not in favor of tabling it, say nay. So So Louis, I'm looking at the screen, seeing where Patrick,
Patrick had his hand up under I.
but I didn't see Mark.
Mark, he is not up.
I'd like to have a clear, vote tally. So we got one opposed.
I would vote up against.
Tabling it.
Is that Mark?
That's Mark.
Mark, he's not feeling it. So we got 2 against tabling it, but the rest of us are for tabling it. I think that's accurate, Kay, right? So we have tabled this. And before you leave though, I want Kay to give us some understanding. It's tabled. I don't think it's going to take some time for you to get its data, but your application is still here. Okay. No further fees are due at this time. Am I correct? No, the time takes time and I want to be fair. And tabling it, I think we're close on this thing. I really feel we are, and I hope we've been
Find all the
helpful.
answers everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I really
including-
think we are closer than we were
And I
before.
agree. I think, like Steve says, I don't see where there is a problem. And the DNR and they just used it, and a verbal agreement over the years was fine. Well, a verbal agreement don't work nowadays. I mean, and if you want to work with them, I mean, that's fine. And that's what I think everybody would like to know is, can it work together? If it can, it can. If it can't, it can't. You know the answers.
Yeah, I feel like if the DNR still wanted to control this land, they should have never let it get into the private sector.
Right. And if they do want it, they can work with.
They can work with you. Yeah.
The reason I
I agree.
ask why how long that sand pile is there, if it's been there long enough, it's your baby. So you can do what you want.
Okay, we have tabled your petition. So our next meeting, if you get things together, we'll get it on the docket. If you need more time, we'll work it out with you. Right? Thank you. With that said, report from the Board of Adjustments.
Yeah, we voted on a variance for the Nelsons to build, I believe it was 84 feet from the center line of County Road 35 in St. Charles Township, rather than the required 100 feet, and that was approved.
I know where that is. Thank you. Steve, any comments?
The last petitions that the planning commission recommended approval on for Michael and Nicole Mattis and Andy and Cindy Cronabush were both approved at the county board level.
Thank you.
Meeting to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. Mark's got his thumb up and I bet Patrick's got his hand up, so we are adjourned.